Good evening and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. We've got the great pleasure of having Garry Nelson with us, so we'll be with him shortly, being hosted by Vic. Just a couple of things, just to remind people that we are doing a gravestone restoration for James Monroe, our first ever paid captain. We're up to 83% of the total, so we've got 1,250, so we're just £250 short. So if anybody can help with that, we have got a good Just Giving page, and it's, if you just go Just Giving and then James Monroe, you should get the link to the site on there. So any help for that would be appreciated. Okay, so any questions you have tonight for Garry, please remember to put them in the comments and we will get through as many as we can. Okay, so let's bring Vic on. Good evening, Vic.
Good evening to you, Chris. I hope you're well.
I'm very good, thank you. Just getting over the shock of the news today, but with Mr. Wellens.
Yes, indeed. 4 months in charge of Salford City. I don't know, what is a long term as a manager these days? Well, who knows?
Exactly.
Yep.
But now we'll bring on Garry. Good evening, Garry.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay, right. Enjoy. I will leave you to it and I'll see you at the end.
Thank you, Chris. Garry Nelson, welcome along. Thank you ever so much for being part of our On the Sofa event. It's great to see you. You look as though you could still play, to be fair. So, you know, you're looking okay.
Yeah, I stopped playing officially, even though I didn't need to. Season before last, 58. We were playing in a Vets League over 35s and very competitive as well. And I just thought, I was still playing well, still fitness-wise, could do it, but the other priorities were, it was cutting in too much into the weekend. And when I lost that little bit of an edge to want to get up on a Sunday morning and go and play, I thought, now this time's right. But I may be making a little bit of a comeback potentially for over 60s football, but not walking.
Oh, not walking football. Okay. Well, you're talking to a member of the Devon Walking Football League Champions squad of 2 years ago. So I can recommend it.
Congratulations. Very good.
Thank you. Should you wish to take it up, it's a great sport. Right. Let's start off then. Born in Braintree in Essex, your clubs, Southend, Swindon Town, of course, Plymouth Argyle, Brighton, Notts County on loan, Charlton, Torquay United. And so much else to talk to you about as well as football. I've got here, this is a book of your time at Torquay United, which I'm particularly interested in, and is a fascinating look at life at a lower league club. Let's go back to the beginning then. Braintree in Essex. When did you first start getting interested in football?
Well, my parents were Liverpudlians, so hence my lifelong love of Everton. Unfortunately, they put me on the blue side, not on the red side with the success of the last few years. But so my dad was football mad. He was a printer. He left Liverpool in 60. I was born in 61. They got a house with the job in those days. I was only there 18 months, and then we moved to Southend, on the outskirts of Southend, which is kind of where really from there I started to develop as a footballer, just playing football like most kids did. And wasn't really on anybody's radar in particular, to be honest with you. I did have a brief flirtation with Southend kids going training Tuesdays and Thursdays, but he didn't go anywhere. I think I got half a game somewhere playing in a local match. Was playing from the school team. And I suppose the big break, Vic, came really when my dad played for a half-decent local veterans, local amateur side called Stanbridge United. Funny enough, Peter Taylor, comes from our neck of the woods and played a few games for them as well. I started playing. My mum and dad divorced, and the only time I got to see my dad was on a Saturday. I was playing football Saturday morning for the school team, and my dad used to play for this team called Crouch Nomads in the afternoon. So I started playing for him when I was 15, even though I shouldn't have been, because it actually wasn't allowed. So I was playing as a ringer. but in one particular friendly game they played, I scored 4 in the first half and 5 in the second for 2 different.
Wow!
And my dad said to me, "Son, you're wasting your time playing with us, even though you enjoyed playing with you." He said, "But let me get you over to Stanbridge." So I started playing for Stanbridge at 16 in their second team, and I played half a season with them at 16 and then got into their first team. And in my debut in the first team, I scored 2 against the reigning sort of local league champions. And that's when sort of drumbeat started a little bit. But it took a whole season. Even the final, we played the final with the cup at Roots Hall, and I scored 2 in the final, and there was nobody there from Southend even looking. So you just thought, well, everybody was saying, you know, Southend surely must be interested because scoring bundles of goals. The following season, in September, I got picked for Essex junior team, which doesn't mean junior in terms of age; it means junior in terms of football ranking. So it wasn't anybody like Stephen Marine or anybody like that. It was like the Parks, purely Parks level football as the junior side of Essex, and we played in London, and I scored a hat trick within an hour, and we won 3-0 and I scored a hat trick. And the runner of the team said, "This is crazy." He said, "You know, you shouldn't be playing at this standard. You let me have a word with a few people." And in the November, I went up to Loughborough University. I've got to be offered a place at Loughborough. I'm still at school doing A-levels. Got a place at Loughborough University to do sports science, PE and geography. And I obviously was keen on taking that as a sort of first choice out after school. But Colchester United called me up out of the blue and asked me to go and play for them in their reserve game in November, the same week as I've been up to Loughborough. And I played one game for them up at Wisbeach. We lost 2-1 it was a town and country league all the way at Wisbeach. We lost 2-1 in the last minute. And the guy came up to me afterwards and said, "I've spoken to the manager about you. He said, we want you. We absolutely want you to sign. He wants to speak to you. You're going to have to come back and speak to us." I said, "Well, it's all a bit fresh for me at the moment, so I'm taking my A-levels. You know, I'll see what's what." He said, "No, we definitely want you. You had a great game." And got to be honest, Vic, I don't remember doing anything special in the game at all, so I don't quite know what they were seeing. But anyway, the local newspaper, the Evening Echo, had been quite a lot of coverage on me. And you'll know your football that Southend United and Colchester are arch rivals. Mm-hmm. So when the Evening Echo found out I'd gone and had a trial for Colchester, they put a really knocking report in the Evening Echo on the Monday. And this is true. I actually put it in the book. This is God's honest truth. I was reading this article about how can it be that Southend United, this lad's been on your doorstep. He's been knocking in the goals, and our arch rivals go and get him before you. Look, I'm literally reading that, and the doorbell goes. Mum comes in. She says, "Daddy, there's a lad at the door here for you from Southend United. Speak to you." So I went to the front door, and it was the physio. So I just happened to be passing, and he'd also been a physio for one of these Essex County games that I played in away at Hampshire. So they'd obviously been looking. Then obviously they'd been prompted, I think, by the fact that that this had happened with Colchester. And anyway, he said, just happened to be passing. He said, "I wondered if you'd turn out for a reserves tomorrow. We're playing Brighton at Roots Hall." I said, "Well, I'm not sure, to be honest, Brian." I said, I played with Colchester on Saturday. I said, "Do you think they'll be all right there?" Anyway, leave that with us. They'll be absolutely fine. So I went, "All right, if that's the case, I'll come and play." And I went and played, and Gary Stevens played for Brighton, and Martin Chivers played for Brighton. And we beat them 3-1. And straight after the game, again, don't remember doing anything too dramatic, but straight after the game, the assistant, John Latimer, came in and said, "Could you come up to the boardroom when you changed? We'd like to speak to you." Well, my mum and my stepdad were up in the boardroom. My mum was pie-eyed. She'd been treated to very nice brandy all night, so she was like happy as Larry, my mum, saying, "Oh, they're lovely people, these, Gary." So Dave Smith, the manager, said to me, like, really, really impressed. "We have been watching you for a while, and you know, what's your situation?" I said, "Well, I'm at school taking my A-levels," and I didn't realise at the time, but Dave was also a grammar school boy, and he'd taken his education. So I think he related to that. He said, look, we definitely want to sign you as a pro. He said, are you prepared to sign straight away? I said, no, I'm not, to be honest. I said, I want to get my A-levels first. I've literally just taken an offer I've just been offered a place at Loughborough. So he said, well, we'll tell you what we'll do. He said, we definitely want to sign you. So he said, we'll let you finish off your education and we'll sign you in the summer. I look back now, Vic, and sweat pours out of me when we were talking about managers earlier and thinking, well, he could have been sacked. So who manager comes in who didn't fancy me? I was playing football 2 or 3 times a week. You know, anything could have happened injury-wise. And I look back and go, no. And that's all I ever wanted to do. But obviously I wanted to get my education side of it and came out with 3 A-levels and literally walked down the road from the school, which is 300 yards. You can see from the playing fields the ground. So literally walked straight from there into the professional ranks at Southend.
I was going to say, how difficult was that decision? Because you got the 3 A-levels, you're offered a place at Loughborough University, which is, you know, pretty decent, to be fair. So was it a case of definitely wanting to go into football, so that swayed it? Or could you have gone the academic route, and who knows which direction your life would have taken? It's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't really have a reference point amongst the family. Nobody from my family had been to university, so the school were sort of beside themselves in sort of saying, yeah, the school was really all about sending people to university. But for me, it hadn't really been on my radar. To be honest, I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for. But David was very fair because I'd got a 3-year place at Loughborough. He gave me a 3-year contract, which is very unusual for somebody coming in, as I did, from purely Parks football. Most of the apprentices that were turning pro actually got a 1-year contract, and they gave me a 3-year deal, which I think was you know, good of him. He didn't need to, but that gave me a little bit of development time, clearly. So for me, it's all I ever wanted to be. I was lucky enough to have a bit of intelligence about me as well, so it was a happy coincidence rather than me being academic and wanting to be academic. It didn't really come as a choice, to be honest. As soon as they said you're going to be a professional footballer, that was me done, to be honest with you.
Yeah, got lots of questions coming in already, and we'll get to them at the end. No, we'll get to them at the end because we've got loads of them already coming in. So if you are sending a question, just to say that Chris will be back to ask you those at the end of our discussion. But there we are. You're at Southend then. But then in 83, 84, Swindon come knocking. Ken Beamish is the manager at the time. And let's face it, it's not the happiest of times at Swindon Town Football Club, is it? What was it like when you walked in?
Well, first thing I have to say is that Ken sold it very well to me. I like Ken. I thought he was a lovely man. I really did. And his enthusiasm was just amazing. I can say it now, and I think he made a bit of a mistake with his number 2, to be honest with you, because I don't think they knew each other that well. I think they'd done their full badges together. And I never quite got the impression that they were rock solid between the 2 of them, which is very important. But they assembled what should, on paper, have been a very, very good squad. I mean, I was still quite young. I was 22 when I signed, and I'd already played I think I'd made nearly 120 league appearances. So, you know, I played a lot of games in a short space of time. But it was also, it was my first taste of moving away from home. My ex-wife and I were about to have a baby. I had a house in Southend that I'd sold, but then didn't sell, and it all fell apart, and we were broke, basically. So these are all the things that happen when you move away and you don't have family around from you. And the football, despite what I thought was a good start, you know, quickly deteriorated, and then you're in a situation where I can remember playing away in the combination league, and when the lads went off to play Millwall, I think, in the FA Cup, and Jimmy might have scored a hat-trick, I think, or they won at Millwall very impressively in the Cup. And we got beat 4-0 at the Vetch in the reserve, and I just thought, well, you know, I'm 22 coming up. I'm 22 coming up 23. I'm just about to have a baby. You know, where's his career going? Which is some of the sort of downsides that you have. You know, that was probably one of the low points. Wasn't quite as low as the 10-0 loss at Highbury, which I mentioned in the book. But you know, Swindon was. I look back at my time in Swindon, and I've got mixed feelings on it. I mean, I enjoyed the time at Swindon. I did actually enjoy. The lads were a great bunch of lads, and had some very, very talented players. It just didn't click or connect somehow. Don't quite know why, but you look at the calibre of players, and they've all had. Most of them have had really good careers, whether that was before Swindon, at Swindon, or thereafter. So there's nothing wrong in Ken's ability to spot players. It was probably just the fact that we didn't have a great season, and it all fizzled out. I don't know if somebody will tell me very quickly, but it's not something I'm particularly proud of, and I'm particularly proud of my career, but it's not something I'm particularly proud of, because I think that might be the lowest position Swindon have ever finished in. Bringing me out in a cold.
Yeah. I hate to tell you, it was 17th in Division 4. Yes, is the answer to that. Yes, it wasn't a great season. You're quite right. But then in the summer, things changed, didn't it? Because Lowndes Lambert came in as sponsors of the football club, and they wanted to find somebody of international repute to come in and manage the club. And one Scottish international pops his head up above the parapet, and his name was Lou Macari. And I remember one of the first things he said was, "This is Swindon Town," and he held up an old jockstrap to say, because there's no money. That was it. And basically, he had to start from scratch, didn't he? What was it like when Lou came in to the county ground?
Well, I think the first thing to say was that they went for Phil Thompson, and Phil Thompson said he was earning more in Sheffield United's reserves than Swindon were offering him to take the manager's job, which I thought...
That's true, yes, very true. Yes.
But, you know, we were... No, to a certain extent, we were a little bit in awe of somebody like Lou coming down. Clearly didn't know what to expect. And even more than that, he brought Harry Gregg with him, who was quite a scary character, actually, but actually had a heart of gold. He's a lovely man, Harry. And Lou come down with a philosophy which he totally changed. To be fair to him, I think he recognised it wasn't going to work, and he did literally swallow his principles and adapt, because he wanted to come down and have us all playing total football. And I remember starting off the season at left back, and he sort of said, just because you're a centre half, it doesn't mean to say you've got a number 5 stamped on your head. If you find yourself in a centre forward position, you know, that's fine, and everybody should fill in. Problem was, you're dealing with 4th division footballers, as we were, and we didn't really get it. We didn't really understood it. What we understood was formations, and being in formations in a structure, and don't complicate it, because we're concentrating on whether our touch is good enough without worrying about where we're playing. And I think we played Bristol Rovers in the League Cup, and we got beat 5. I think 4 of those goals were like clean through from the halfway line, so clearly something was going drastically wrong. And I think Harry pulled Lou to one side and said, "Look, these are 4th division footballers, Lou. You've got to keep it simple. You've got to get them structured. You've got to get them disciplined." And he said, "Let me take the replay. Let me get them organised." And we went to Bristol Rovers. I mean, the tie was dead, but we beat them 1-0, and we were solid. And I think Lou learned a valid lesson. And then he also looked at the physicality of the division. And I think from his future signings, you'll see he built a very big team. He went quite long and quite direct. And, you know, to be fair, I played 43 out of 46 games that season. And I think I played well. I played consistently. I didn't score goals, as you know, which I've gone on and done, which I disappointed myself. I don't think I only got 3 that year, but I made a lot of goals and was consistently playing well. But I never quite felt whether Lou really fancied me as a player or not, really. You were never quite sure. And, you know, I look back and there were some bizarre moments with Lou. He was unique, really. I mean, I can remember running along Queen's Drive, and Lou suddenly said, "Right, everybody dive underneath that road sign." And the road sign was only about 2 foot above the ground, and you've got the whole Swindon squad running along a busy road where obviously people knew you were, and you're scrambling underneath this road sign. And then he'd go, "Right, let's see how many people we can get in that phone box." And you'd all have to pile in the phone box and see as many. Knowing Lou, he probably had a bet on 15 of us getting in. And there was things like that. It's quite, you look back and it's quite humorous. But then there was the other things where you would have have spikes on a Friday morning. You'd do running in spikes, and then he'd say, "Right, we'll have a wheelbarrow race." And we had this wheelbarrow race from the goal line out to the 18-yard box with players wearing spikes. Nigel Gray picked up somebody, can't remember who, and his spikes cut his wrist and nearly severed his main artery in his wrist. And he actually missed the game. And you just look at that going, that's crazy. But you can't not lose record. I mean, the impetus was there. I think we finished the season very strongly. We just gave ourselves too much to do. And you know, Lou built that impetus, and to be fair to him, had a fantastic time beyond that. But you know, I wasn't sure whether Lou really fancied me or not. And I know that Dave Smith, my manager at Plymouth, had made an inquiry, because Lou told me. Lou thought I'd been speaking to Dave, which I absolutely hadn't. I can categorically tell everybody that I hadn't. Lou thought I'd been talking to him and he'd been talking to me, and that we absolutely hadn't. And he made an inquiry, tried to get me on loan down at Argyle, swapping me with Lee Cooper, I think it was, who came from Reading. And I don't know whether he intimated that he wanted to be a bit closer to home. I don't know. Anyway, that didn't happen. But I think I pretty much made my mind up that, you know, if somebody from a higher division was coming in for me, then I'd want to sort of move up and sort of stay and see how it went.
What about the fitness side of it? Because, I mean, Lou was, you know, famous for the fitness side of it. Run. And how was that? You'd gone from Ken Beamish to Lou. How different were those two ethos? Were they chalk and cheese? Were they similar? How did that work?
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. We'd still had our training days, but Lou had basically analysed what it is that he needed, and he needed fit, strong people to play that particular style of play. So, got to be perfectly honest, I've always had not a problem with running. I might have had a problem with the ball at my feet, but running was never a problem for me. So it was hard. It wasn't always hugely enjoyable. Because most footballers don't mind keeping fit, but I hate running really. But you can't knock the results that Lou got out of it. I mean, I know we didn't get promotion that first season that he was there, but the signs were clearly building, and he went on to do it the following season. So he knew exactly what we wanted, and he got the players in to do it for him. And he also was enough of a character and enough of he'd done it in the game, so you couldn't knock his. You know, one or two of the older pros weren't that keen on it, and so on and so forth. But you couldn't really knock what he was trying to do and what he did, and you know, and the Swindon fans loved him for it. So you know,
there was one that I mentioned to you earlier, and I remember it to this day. It was a horrible, filthy, rotten day up at Rochdale, and my memory of it is that you. Well, let's put it bluntly, you got very cold that day, didn't you? And it was a victory up in front of 1,700 people at Spotland. And I can remember it to this day. It was a horrible, filthy day. And just to add salt into the wound, the supporters bus broke down on the way back, which was a real laugh. Just take us through that game, because it did affect you badly, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, I can't remember it. You might be able to remind me, but I thought it was November, but I might be wrong.
It was around, yeah.
And these were the days where I only had one sub, and it was. If you've ever been up that way, it sits at the top of the hill, Rochdale, in kind of the sort of foothills of the Pennines, and the rain was just coming in torrential, and as it's coming towards you can see it's turning to white. As it's coming, that's how cold it was. So it was like sleet, stroke, snow, but it was torrential. And we all trotted out in our warm-up, and those were the days before you didn't even have warm-up tops. So you just went out there, and our kit we were absolutely soaked. We hadn't even started. And after 10 minutes, it was like freezing cold. Your hands were freezing. You put all the oils that you could put on, but it was still freezing cold. But I just remember being blooming freezing, and Lou pulled something in about the 12th minute and went off. So that was the option gone for all of us to come off, because it was that cold. I think the only good consolation bit for me was from my corner. I think Colin Gordon scored his first goal for the club. I think it was his debut goal. And Colin, being Colin, he didn't stop telling us about that all the way back on the bus, because he was a quiet boy. And but in the bath afterwards, I just couldn't get warm. I was blooming freezing. I was, you know, teeth were chattering. I was cold because there was not a lot of me. And Lou popped in and saw me and asked me how I was. And I said, Gaffer, I'm blooming freezing. I can't get warm. And the next thing, and I think it's well documented that Lou's very anti-drink, he popped in with a whiskey, which was a nice touch. I downed the whiskey, and I'm not so sure I felt instantly any better, but I was quite pleased that Lou had bought me a scotch, considering he was teetotal. And so he obviously must have I was in a bad way. But it was 753 first-team appearances I made. That was without a shadow of a doubt, the coldest I've ever been on a football pitch. But we won 1-0, so it could have been worse. Sorry about your bus on the way home. It was probably
no. Yeah, it was not a great night. It wasn't a great day, apart from the win, obviously. Actually, the irony of Lou, of course, is he won the Bells Manager of the Month, goodness knows how many times, and ended up with great big bottles of whiskey, didn't he? So it was quite.
The only thing was he obviously didn't take that away with him, so I can't say it was a freebie.
There was the sacking, of course, over Easter of Lou in his first season. What do you remember of that?
Oh yeah, it was a bizarre time because Lou got sacked and he asked us to go around there. And to be perfectly honest, we were. I've got to be honest, I wasn't overly disappointed because we'd had a little bit of a fallout prior to that over an incident, and he'd left me out for a game, and then I played in that game at Highbury where we got beat 10-0. There'd been this talk about possibly going, so for me, I kind of made my mind up, even though, don't get me wrong, I gave 100% every game because I was in the shop window almost. That we weren't that fazed by it, and I think we went away to Chesterfield, and I think we won up at Chesterfield and gave a very good performance, I think, and that was in the interim. But then we played Southend, I think, on the Easter Monday, my old club, and I actually scored. And I remember Lou came in. It was quite a big crowd there for us in those days, and I think Lou came in after about 10 minutes, and I think the whole of the stand stood up, and we're right behind him. So clearly the sentiment was that they felt it was not right, and it was, and to be fair to the board, I've never heard of it in football. I don't think I've heard of it since where it's been overturned. But in that case, fan power definitely worked, and you can't knock the record that Lou had at Swindon Town. I mean, he had a fantastic record. I was one small part of that. Not to take any credit whatsoever because we didn't achieve anything in those 2 years, but it gave him the insight as to what it was that was required to get out of that division, and actually to take it further because he got out of the next division as well. And in theory, he could have taken it all the way. So, fair play.
Harry Gregg departed, of course, as part of that whole incident, and. On Good Friday, it was a Good Friday sacking, and from Swindon. Then, when you look back now, could it have worked out better? Could you have stayed longer, or were you pretty much set? I mean, you went on to play at Plymouth, which we'll get to in a minute, and had a fantastic time. I think it's fair to say. But could you have stayed longer at Swindon?
Well, playing 43 out of 46 games. I would have said yes, absolutely. Was I good enough to play every week? Yes. The interesting thing going back a year was I played a reserve game. I played a game at Bristol City over Easter, played up front, and I've been telling Ken that's where I should be playing, Ken. I'm not being funny, but that's where I think you get the best out of me, especially in this division. And he played me at Bristol City, and he said, you had a brilliant game there, so I can see the problems that you cause. And then he said, there's a game against Arsenal. In the combination, he said, I'd like you to have another run out. And I got a hat trick, and we beat them 5 or 6-0, I think. And he said, I've missed this. He said, you should be playing. I'm going to play you up front next season. So I was all like buoyed up about that. And then of course Lou came along, and I ended up playing left back. I suppose if Lou. I think once Lou realised, I think Lou had made his mind up that I was wanting to go, and had got it in his head. So I think when the offer came in, which to my mind was derisory, considering that I played the 43 out of 46, But Lou had decided that would be his stance because it was going to go to a tribunal and that I was going. So the music was, regardless, Lou was probably looking for an alternative in that position. And you read the writing on the wall. But, you know, I look back and think, well, in 2 seasons, I think I played 77 league games, which is pretty good going. I would have certainly liked to have scored a lot more goals. I should have scored a lot more goals. But it was a big part of my learning career, during my career. Moving away from home, having to grow up very quickly, having a young child. Did we like living in the area? Absolutely. We moved out of Wootton Bassett, very happy in the area. Had some good people I met down there, very good people. And, you know, it's a good football club. It's a great football club and a lot of very passionate supporters. You know, again, all of those things are right. In the 4th division, they were probably the biggest club in the division. And, you know, they're a championship side at least, aren't they? That's where they should. That's their level, you know, pushing on perhaps as they have done once before. But for me, you know, it wasn't the greatest time during the club's experience. I got the chance to go up a division, reacquaint myself with a manager that knew all about me from a school kid. So I felt as if, you know, I was in comfortable territory with him. He was clearly keen on getting me back because he knew who I was, what I bought. And from that point of view, that was quite a nice feeling that a manager of his experience wanted me again. So you know, it was a job done really, and I certainly don't look back at that because those 2 seasons down at Plymouth were amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I know people who are Plymouth Argyle fans, and it is interesting that whatever club you've been at, whenever you speak to somebody about you, you're quite a popular player, aren't you? And you know, I think at Plymouth, you kind of a bit of a legend. Let's be honest, at Home Park, aren't you? And how do you view the time down at Home Park?
Just the best of times. I think I documented it in the book. It gave me the moment, you know, as opposed to Swansea away in the reserves losing 4-0 or Highbury away losing 10-0 in the reserves. As the low points of the game, it gave me the moment why I wanted to be a professional footballer. Everything that you do, okay, it's Wembley and it's the cup final, isn't it, down the local park when you're a kid and you scored a winning goal in the cup final and get your hands on the cup. But it was promotion winning night against Bristol City, 25,000 people at Home Park. I scored an absolute screamer to put us 2-0 up. And, you know, in that one moment, it was the reason why I wanted to be a footballer, to enjoy that particular moment. So Dave gave me that opportunity to do that. I loved the area, very, very happy down in the area. Not to say I didn't like the Swindon area, I did, but obviously it kind of goes with having a great time, doesn't it? You have a fixation about a place, all of your memories are happy memories as opposed to mixed memories at Swindon, and that's nothing to do with the place or the town or the people. It's just as your career develops, it was more difficult. You don't have quite the same positive memories about it, whereas Plymouth, very, very happy, positive memories. And you know, there is a club with potential. You know, it's the biggest town in the southwest by some distance. I think it's the 8th biggest city in England, and they've never been in the Premier League. And you think there's something not quite right where they're really there. They should be, shouldn't they, with a city that size? But it was just one of those things, really. We got 2 great runs going during the season. We thought our burst our bubble when if you remember, Reading that season won the most consecutive games at the start of the season ever. And we had a penalty against them in the 88th minute at home in the second game, and Jerry McElhinney had it saved. That nobody would have even thought about it, but they went on to win, I think, 13 or 14 games. Well, we played them in November or December at Elm Park, and we were 3-0 up with an hour gone, and we got beat 4-3. And that was on the back of this first great run that we had. And it blew us for a little while. We blew up a little bit. Then there was quite a bad weather spell, and I think we missed about 4 weeks of the season. And we had these 17 games to come that were Saturday, Tuesday, like that. And we just got in one of these runs. And I think out of those 16 games, we won we won 14, drew 1 and lost 1. And the one that lost 2, 13. Yeah, we lost 2 games, and the first one of those games was the first game when Dave Smith said, right, we need to do this over the next games to go up. And he said that, and we lost the first game at home to Doncaster 1-0. But, you know, it gave us that unbelievable night at Home Park, beating Bristol City 4-0 to go up. We had to go to Darlington last game of the season, and none of us really wanted to go up there and have to win. But we didn't need to. We went up there anyway, and I think we took 3,000 up from Plymouth on the buses to Darlington. You know, that journey is amazing. And we took, and then we had the tour around the city on the open top bus. It peed down with rain, but that was Plymouth. It happens like that. But it didn't stop people turning out and us having a great time. And then in the second season, we did brilliant. We were in the top. I think we were in the top 4 virtually all season. And then transfer deadline day came, and Derby County and 1 or 2 others splashed out and brought reinforcements in. And our directors, who'd each put 15 grand in each, I think 2 or 3 seasons before to keep the club going, decided that with all the profits from the better gates, they, rather than buy players to get us in the first division, they paid themselves back the 15 grand they were owed. So I think they were terrified of the fact that if they went up, they would be, you know, they wouldn't be able to compete. I don't know. I think it scared the living daylights out of them. So I think we went to Derby on the last day of the season. Derby needed to win it to win the championship. We needed to win it to have a chance of still getting in the playoffs. And I scored 2, but we got beat 4-2. And Derby went up, and their investment in those players proved fruitful, and ours didn't. And I think our average gates fee had gone up from 4,000 to 12,500. And then the offer, I'd scored 20 odd goals from the wing. We got promotion. We'd finished 7th in the championship equivalent now, and they offered me the same money as I joined to stay. And I've got 2 children now, and I just thought, I'm 26 now. I love this football club. I really loved the area. I'm so happy. The lads were just fantastic. We were like, all of us, no superstars. We were just like that. Tommy Tynan came in, who was sort of like the name down there at the end of the season, and did brilliant for us. Scored 10 goals in 9 games, I think, and got us up. But he realised, because he was the sort of main man before he left to go to Rotherham, but he came back a season later and he realised that we were like that, strong bottom. And brilliant Tom, he realised that he couldn't be the main man anymore, because we'd all done it, and he was really good about it. He'd actually learned, and he was savvy enough to think, I can't be, Johnny on the spot all the time. And he was a fantastic player. So really, I didn't feel as if I had any choice other than to see whether there were people out there that wanted me. And the first person to come in was Alan Borg out of Portsmouth. And bearing in mind the club had offered me the same money as I joined them from Swindon, suddenly I stuck 100 grand price tag on my head. And that scared Portsmouth off. And they bought Dave Stewart, the Northern Irish winger, for on a free transfer, I think. So they got him on a free. And he obviously got first division experience. I didn't. Sadly, I think he ruptured his Achilles in his debut, and I don't think he played. But out of the blue, I had calls from Ray Lewington at Fulham. They were very interested. And then Barry Lloyd at Brighton just came in and said, this is what I'm prepared to offer you. I want you to join the football club. I'm rebuilding. And I looked at it and thought, wow. There's no, it was a step down a division, but there was no doubt in my mind I had to take it. So,
and that Brighton were at that time, of course, at the Goldstone, weren't they? Before they started the nomadic experience, you had 4 years at Brighton, and again, it seemed to be a club that fitted you. You'd had this spell at Swindon for 2 years. You were at Argyle, which you clearly loved. I believe you were in the team of the century at Argyle. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know quite how, to be honest with you. I felt before I was Black who played there for ages. I think it's the fact that there weren't the people that were voting. Nobody could remember that far back. But that was a great honour for me, because if you think I was only there 2 years, to leave a mark on a club like that, particularly in the circumstances that, you're there, everybody likes you and you're very popular, that you go, that people usually, that's a little bit of a black mark for you. But people understood, I think, the logic behind it. And of course, it didn't help them or the board of directors that I then went and scored 32 goals the following season. So, funnily enough, Dave Smith came and watched me play that season when I scored 32, and he wanted to sign me back. And he actually put an offer in to sign me back. But interestingly, he brought an offer in to sign me back, and Tommy Tyne told me later that he was bringing me back to play on the wing again. So I wouldn't have gone if I knew that. But,
so obviously Brighton suited you. 4 years there, scoring goals, playing football. And was it Goldstone all the time? Because this is where, you like nomadic clubs, don't you? Because you're going to go on and move to Charlton, who also had their ground problems. So was it 4 years at the Goldstone?
Yeah, 4 years. The last two were not anywhere near as successful. As top goal scorer the first 2 seasons there, one in the 3rd division and then one in the 2nd division. 3rd season, I got an injury which wasn't diagnosed. I kept trying to play through it, and I just wasn't able to. I was playing for about an hour and in a lot of discomfort, and the season just didn't happen for me because of this long-standing injury. And then I went into the following season really out of favour and out of sorts, really, because of this ongoing injury I had. Worked right through the summer to try and get fit again, and then the manager came in and said, "I'm bringing some fresh blood in. I want to play you on the left wing again." And I said, "Well, I still think I'm a forward gaffer. I want to play up front. I don't really want to play." He said, "No problem." Then the next thing I know is I'm basically sort of kind of left out, and I wasn't actually, because he got an injury, couldn't bring in the lad in. I scored a couple of goals early on in the season, and then I was sort of like out of favour, and that's when, in fact, I played at Swindon in a reserve game and scored a goal against Swindon, and Mick Jones was there from Neil Warnock's coaching team, and that's when I went up. I was supposed to go to Bournemouth. Harry wanted to sign me at Bournemouth in the September. It was all meant to go through, and then it just didn't. They signed Andy Jones from Charlton, ironically. Signed Andy Jones from Charlton. And Harry come up to me after. I know Andy, so he won't mind me saying this, but Harry come up to afterwards and said, 50-50 on that one, Nels. He said, "No, I should have gone the other way." But Harry was always a smooth talker, so he might have just been saying that. But, Harry, I'm very impressed with Harry. He makes you feel very special. But that didn't happen. Then I went to Notts County, and Neil loved me the way that I was with the lads. He thought it was a great addition. I really sparked him again. He brought me in to spark him, to put a rocket up a few people's jackses, and I loved it. I thought he was brilliant. I think a lot of other managers hate him, and he goes absolutely ballistic. But tell you what, he was great for the players, and he was very loyal to a lot of those players as well over time. But he did have some good players at Notts County at the time, and they couldn't quite. They wanted Phil Stanley to go somewhere, and they couldn't sell him, and they needed to sell him to bring me in, and it didn't work, and it just all fizzled out. And I think I ended up. I played 12 games, scored 5 goals, which is not a bad ratio, but I was sub-zillions at times, and it all petered out. And then Curbs had left, who was a teammate of mine at Brighton, and then he got the Charlton job, and he said, "I want you straight away. I want you." So
you mentioned Neil Warnock, of course. He had a time at Torquay, and of course there was a promotion winner at Argyle as well. So another connection with you there. Charlton Athletic at the time. Where were they in terms of the ground? Were they weren't back at the Valley?
They had been at Selhurst. The Valley was 3 or 4 games away from being complete. So I signed in '91, and we were supposed to. Our fourth game of the season at home was meant to be at the Valley, and in the meantime we were borrowing Upton Park. Then one of the directors, I think he was the vice chairman, his building company went under. So none of the subbies had been paid who were working on the ground. And at that stage, Charlton, I believe, came very, very close to going under completely. And a guy from Chicago who became a bit of a pal of mine, I went out to visit a few years later, stuck £1 million in and saved them. And he was born at 200 yards away from the Valley and had heard about it and stuck in, as I said, £1 million and kept us going. And fantastic. Another wonderful football club. Great history. What those fans have done to get them back to the Valley is a story in its own right and been written about many times. And I ended up thinking, with the quality of players I had, I might have 2 years if I was lucky. Ended up staying 5, which is the longest time I had. I made my 500th league game there, 600th league appearance, scored my 100th league goal, was one short of getting my 150th league, 50th first team goal while I was there, was captain, and played. I made over 200 appearances, so not bad when you're 30.
No, very good. And one Leigh Power, who Swindon fans will know about, of course, a teammate of yours?
He was, briefly. We signed him just as we were going back to the Valley. And his first game, I think, was the game back at the Valley. And an awful lot of people, including Charlton fans, struggled to name him in that team that played, because obviously I think he was only there a month. But he managed to get a play in that one amazing game.
How emotional was that? Because we all remember that about Charlton Athletic. And, you know, I covered a game with Swindon against Charlton at Upton Park. And they were also at Selhurst, as you mentioned. Bizarre to see a football club play away from where they should be playing. So to actually go back to their spiritual home, how emotional was that?
It was a totally unique game, Vic. I'm so privileged and proud to have played in that game, because you won't believe what it meant to them. I've got to know so many of those fans that stuck in their pockets and bought 10-year season tickets. We all got to, because it was very temporary at the time and it was still generating, we had these porter cabins, and all the players and all the sort of VIP members who'd paid these 10-year tickets all mingled together. So I got to know them very personally. And, you know, they were grown men crying their eyes out. You know, it was a privilege. It was a big pressure. We had to win, but it didn't really matter. The more important thing was the club was back home and it gave them a future. But what an enormous, totally unique game. People ask me, what was your most memorable game? Games are memorable for different reasons, but that was a totally memorable game and one of the most. And as I said, it's a totally unique experience, and it was what all the football club was about, to be part and parcel. You hear Keith Peacock speaking, or Alan Kirkchley talking now. He said, you know, we didn't have money. We brought in good characters who got experience. This is what the good youngsters needed, because they had fantastic youngsters coming through. And he said, you know, those lads laid the paving stones for what was built thereafter. And again, that makes me feel very proud of what we achieved there.
Sure. And then, let me hold this book up here. Left Foot Forward is your first book, isn't it? This is Left Foot in the Grave, a view from the bottom of the Football League. And this is about your next club, One Torquay United. Now, you come across an owner here called Mike Bateson, who I got to know quite well. You will have met Algernon on the puppet and the parrot in his office. And an extraordinary man who once said to me, you can phone me any time of the day or night except when countdown is on. If you phone me during countdown, I'll never speak to you again. That's and he said it with a smile on his face. You know, he was that sort of chap. And what was your experience of Torquay? Because Kevin Hodges, your former Argyle teammate, I think, was there. He wanted you to join him. Yeah,
and I've got, you know, Kev to me was everything about professional football. You know, most record appearances for Plymouth, very grounded, very humble, just a wonderful individual, and a very, very underrated player. An awful lot of people, probably outside of the West Country, don't really know Kevin that well. Probably they would have seen him many times, but believe you me, he was a very, very, very good footballer. And Kevin asked me to go down as a player and as a coach. I'd taken my coaching badge. I wanted to go into coaching. And I knew Kevin and I liked Kevin, got a lot of time for him. And the challenge to me was, well, we can't do any worse, can we? Little did I know. But it was a great experience. It was a hell of an experience. And I suppose the one regret I've got in terms of where my career went after football was I would have liked to have spent a lot more time coaching, because I love it. I get a lot out of it. I think a lot of the players that work with me get a lot out of it. And I think I was a good coach. I think I'm a good communicator. I see things well. Got an eye for players. But made decisions in life, and that didn't go that way. But it was a huge culture shock, to be honest, having been at Charlton, not having a training ground, the geology of the area being against you when it's too dry or too wet. So you're stuck, being chucked off the school playground behind playing ball during half term because we're doing a five-a-side because we've only got 10 players, and the caretaker comes round, chucks you off, so you do the walk of shame. Algernon, the puppet that was on the board at Torquay, the rare blue-beaked parrot that he had in the incubator on the boardroom table, that he would quite happily tell all the visiting directors that the blue-beaked parrot was worth more than his entire first-team squad. A lovely little football club, Torquay, and I don't mean to be disparaging by saying a little football club, but it's a lovely football club, and they've done a great job with the ground. Garry Johnson was having amazing impetus before lockdown 3, and they seem to have fallen off the rails a little bit at the moment.
Yeah.
They had a win earlier this week, so hopefully he can get them back, because they've had a really, really strong run. I didn't really, having invested all that money in the ground and then seeing them not even in the National League, but one below, I thought, well, that's an awful long way back. But it would be good to see them back, even just for West Country football, I've got a lot of time for Torquay, I did like my time there with some great characters. Mike, I liked Mike, I've got to be honest with you. He was very likeable. He's your chairman, so you're not supposed to like him as a manager or a coach. I did like him. I thought he was funny. He had a great sense of humour. Didn't take himself too seriously, and he could put a laugh on your face, even though there wasn't a lot to laugh about.
Yeah, he was great, and he was one of the. I think he was a lovable eccentric. That's the best way I can describe him.
Absolutely, yeah, he was, yeah. But he cared about his football club a lot.
Yeah, he did, and actually ran it at a profit for many years, which is, not to be sneezed at, is it?
Oh, sorry.
Was that the phone?
Turn it
on. Yeah, that's the manager wanting you to play next season, I expect. Now then, what about? Let's get on to book writing and the PFA then, in the time that's available to you, because to us. When did you first have an idea of writing a book? Because these books are not, they're pretty darn good, and they, both were in the running for Sports Book of the Year, which, tremendous, really. So when did you first have an idea to write these books?
I didn't really. A guy approached me after meeting me on New Year's Day, 94, at Forest. He travelled up with his son and a couple of friends, stayed overnight and watched the game. It was, I think, 11 o'clock kickoff, so he obviously made a big commitment to be up there. And I me and a group of lads, Charlton lads, spent a bit of time talking to him, and they all sort of like dwindled away, and I just kept on talking to him, as I quite often did with people that had taken a lot of time to travel away, if I could. And I got a letter out of the blue saying, I'm a professional writer. He said, I think you'd make a great topic for a book. Would you be interested? So I said, no, nobody's going to buy a book about me. He said, no. He said, I think some of the stories that you may have over a long career, he said, I think you would. Why don't we meet up? So I went and met him, and I said to him, I just spent 2 hours talking to him, a bit like we're doing now, talking stories and recollections and my views on the game and where it's going, etc., etc. And he went, this is brilliant. He said, it's definitely, and he said, no, do you think that how do you want to play it? I said, well, one thing for sure is you're not going to be a ghostwriter. I want to write it. I said, you're a professional writer, so you can polish it. I said, and we'll get into a working flow where I'll write it, send it to you, you'll polish it, send it back. And I said, the people who know me and love me won't recognise me in that, so write it again, rewrite it. It has to be me. People have to see me in it. And that's how we got on. But, I think the first few drafts we did, first few days of the season, first few weeks of the season, it took 7 goes between us to go backwards and forwards. But by the time we were sort of halfway through the season, I was sending him stuff up and he was doing one rewrite and sending it back. So it worked really well. And, he's a very talented guy, a big lover of football. not been too well, unfortunately. But we got on really well, and I'm absolutely thrilled with how it's been received, and B, how many copies have been sold. So it means an awful lot of people have read it. About, let's be honest, somebody who had a really good career but didn't have a fantastic career, which is kind of the normal place of those people who write football books.
But then a lot of people who are football fans would find those much more interesting, the ones that you've written, than the superstars, let's put it like that, who, most of their stuff is well documented. But, writing about a year in the life of Torquay United is not, what you would say is your sort of average football fare. But to read about it for somebody who's a football fan is fascinating. So maybe that's where you scored, if I might put it like that, a pretty good goal in terms of writing those books.
Yeah, I think obviously the Torquay United one became easier on the back of the first one, it has to be said. And certainly the number of journalists that reviewed the first book, Michael Parkinson, I had a delightful hour and a half with at a hotel in London, loved the second book as well, being a Barnsley supporter all his life, a bit unfashionable. And really where I wanted to come from in this was to basically, for all those people who ever dreamed of being a footballer, I wanted them to all go, oh, that's what it's like. That's the day-to-day life of a footballer. And for all those who've been footballers, the vast majority of them, they'll go, that's exactly how it is. That's the life of a footballer. And that's, Garry's captured that perfectly. And I think I trod that line pretty well, to be honest with you. And then obviously you had the commentary on bigger events going on, not just in football, but in society. And then just football generally, the sort of rising pay salaries, Sky coming into it, and so on and so forth. And I mean, the game's unrecognisable even in 25 years since I wrote it. So, a great deal of satisfaction, to be honest with you.
Rightly so. You've worked with the PFA. Where is the PFA at the moment? You mentioned the money in the game. Where the BBC are running a series at the moment about the very, very disturbing events which took place with people like Paul Stewart, things like that. What about the PFA? How involved are they with the welfare of players? I'm not sure you're still with the PFA, but you certainly were for a while.
No, I was there 4 years, Vic. Sort of 36 to 40, was responsible for things that you might remember, like Masters football. Yeah. I was at that inaugural meeting happened in my office with a blank piece of paper. You may also recall for quite a few years, players would come into every professional game in the country, working for the Press Association, giving statistical analysis. That's again something I'm very proud of to have set up, because the PFA were actually giving the Press Association our database, and we were getting nothing for it to pay the ex-players. So I quickly nipped that in the bud and said, "Oi, we'll do it through the PFA and earn the PFA Benevolent Fund and charity funds some money, and we'll supply you with all the players." So we had a lot of lower league players going around who, to be fair, were struggling after football, giving them some gainful employment and something to look forward to at the end of the week, getting them back involved. The PFA, to my mind, is a marvellous entity. It always has been. It's very important. Players are represented. I don't really know the association as it was during my time, because things have moved on so much. The one consistent has probably been Gordon, who again has been there a long period of time, and is a well-respected and regarded person in the game. But I think he probably stayed on a few more years than he should have done. But they've now gone about it in a way whereby they've got an exciting new appointment, an ex-player, but somebody who's obviously a qualified lawyer. But the amount of money that's in the game, there shouldn't be the same. There shouldn't be the amount of issues that former players have, because they're lost. They lack direction, so many of them. And obviously the things with dementia, and then the subject of the program tonight as well. But it's a footballing issue. It's a societal issue, to be honest. But very, very upsetting for us as former players who didn't go through anything, who never came across that side of the game. For those players who did, it's just absolutely appalling and shocking. And,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so.
Being so brave to come out and talk about it as well.
Totally. And I saw a very emotional interview with Paul Stewart today, and Goodness me, your heart goes out to him. Let's just briefly, very quickly then, because we're going to move on to the questions that people have been sending in. And so we'll do that. 100 keepy uppies while sitting down, a recent charity event for you. And also you've had your first jab, like me. So, you know, Tempest Fugit, as it were.
Last Thursday, so it's been a good
there you go. Yeah. Tempest Fugit, as they say. But what about those 100 keepy uppies? A bit of speciality for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it was something that I always quite enjoyed. You know, you get a bit bored just doing standing up, keepy uppies. So and somehow, I don't know why, especially with my feet, I actually found that I was quite good at it. So I used to do it every morning in training at Charlton. And when we went into lockdown just before last Easter, I thought, is there anything I can do to raise a bit of money? So I thought, well, I'll see if I can kick the ball up for 100 sitting on my backside in the back garden. And our back garden slopes like that as well, by the way. So it wasn't a flat surface. The ball kept away from me. Said to my wife, look, I feel as if I should do something. I said, with my Twitter following and et cetera, I think, I think I could probably raise a couple of £100 here for NHS. And and bit of social posting, putting a few silly videos and photos and not taking yourself too seriously. And I think we ended up raising £5,000. So, and I did, by the end, after less than a week, I ended up under camera being recorded on the big day. I managed to do 162. So I was absolutely gutted. I didn't get to 200 actually, but the target was 100. So I'd still got it. And the garden was
62. Very good.
in the back of the room.
Brilliant. Garry, thank you very much indeed. Chris is now going to rejoin us because we've got questions that have come in. So, Chris, if you want to come back in.
Thank you, Vic. Very enjoyable.
Thank you, Garry. Absolute pleasure to do it. And, hearing stories from somebody like yourself is absolutely gold dust as far as football fans are concerned. So thank you very much indeed. Yeah. Chris, welcome back.
Hi. No, and I think Rob has actually summed it up. Fascinating evening. So
we seem to have lost Chris. Chris, just to explain, you're sounding a bit like a Dalek at the minute, so I'm not sure.
Am I?
Quite,
oh.
No. It all sounds a bit technical. I'll kick it off then while Chris reconnects. Right, this is from Derek Elston, who you might have come across him. He used to be watched every game.
Lovely to hear from him. Lovely guy.
Yeah, he's watched every game since the year 1826, I think. Right. Left foot in the grave and left foot forward. Are there any other Garry Nelson football-based books probably in the pipeline, or are you thinking of it?
It would have to be in my retirement, and it might even be just as a lifetime of football, because I've obviously gone on and played lots of amateur football, which has been hilarious at times and deeply disturbing at other times. I've captained England in a World Cup in Thailand. I've played in the Hong Kong Masters. So there's been lots of nice things to do afterwards. But we actually had a book that I thought would have made a great story, and Charlton agreed to it, whereby I would follow 5 people through Charlton in their first season back in the Premier League. And Alan Kerbishley, the chairman, squad players had gone from the Championship up to the Premier League and was now sort of like on the periphery now that they'd gone up, and they brought a load of people in. The physio and a fan. So somebody like a Derek, having followed them all around in all these unfashionable places, going into the Premier League, and what did he make of it all, or she make of it all? And so those 5 would be the track, and we'd do it in a similar way through the diary of the season. It would have made a fantastic story, because Charlton were top of the league, Premier League, within the first few weeks, and they, I think, got relegated on the last day of the season. So it would have made a fantastic story. Charlton wanted to do it, and they wanted some money for doing it, and the publishers, on the back of 2 best-selling books, didn't want to pay Charlton the money. So they turned around and said to me, basically, you pay them the advance. And I'm going, you're having a laugh on me. I said, we get one hell of a story here on the basis of 2 best-selling books, and you want me to put all this work in and pay the advance you're giving me to write the book to pay the club. And then, in the same breath, you'd hear that they've just given £100,000 advance to somebody who's going to write a terrible book because they've scored the winner in a cup final. So that never happened. for sure. And the access we would have got would have been fantastic, unique, and a great insight. And it goes outside of Charlton, and that's what the book of Left Foot Forward was about. It, as soon as it went outside Charlton, fans read it and could relate to things like that in their own club, we knew we were onto a winner, because it needed to get outside of Charlton, to be honest. And this book would have gone outside of Charlton, even though it was about Charlton. But there you go. So, potentially, yes, never say never. In my dotage, perhaps. But certainly don't have time right now, that's for sure.
Okay, lovely. Chris, are you back with us?
I don't know. Am I? Is it?
You are. Yes,
oh,
we
that's
can hear
good.
you.
Yes,
That's much better. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay, we'll still keep on the subject of the book. This from Rich. We've heard the decision that why you actually done them, but did you have any obstacles or problems while you're writing it? I think maybe from other players or anything like that. Were you?
No, that's a very, very good point, and it was something that I laboured long and hard about. And what we decided to do was to be surreptitious about it, because I didn't want people acting differently. So if they know that you're basically writing something about everything they're doing, it's a very false place to be. Having done that, the trick then was to make sure that you didn't compromise anybody, and you didn't, reveal things about people that you shouldn't reveal, and to try and keep it as light-hearted and not stray across lines in which you really felt confidentiality was exposed. And I think, one or two people were upset. Martin Cool was upset, but he and I have met since and talked it through. And what would have changed that was him just coming in after he'd nearly finished my career and coming in afterwards into the treatment room and just asked me, "How are you?" Yeah. Sorry. That would have been the end of it, because Martin's was a very talented footballer and a massive competitor. Obviously, Barry Lloyd, the way that we fell out, it wasn't over keen, and to a certain extent, probably Lou as well. You can't write a book which doesn't tell it as you see it, but also be mindful that me personally had a wonderful reputation with the players that I worked around, got on with everybody, but also as a PFA delegate, for example. So some of the things like Tommy Caton way and things where you start to tread down difficult lines, you have to be very, very mindful. So I think I've got to be honest that I think trod that line brilliantly. And, virtually everybody I've written that book to still talks to me. I've met Lou 7 times afterwards. And to be fair, what Lou's done was marvellous. That's one of my favourite things I've ever seen. And that's unique to Lou. You can see Lou with some of the things that we experience. You can see Lou doing that and loving that and liking it and laughing about it. And so he's gone on to do for the homeless in around Stoke. Just, take my hat off to him. So we're all grown up, we're all a lot older, we're all a lot more wiser and experienced. So, I don't think I've burnt any bridges too much, and I haven't been kneecapped by anybody yet anyway. So
good. And just some quick fire questions, as we say. What's the best player you played with?
What's the best? Sorry, I missed that slightly. The best. What's
the best player you've played with?
Do you want that one from Swindon perspective?
Any?
Well, from a Swindon perspective, probably in terms of potential to go on further was probably Jimmy Quinn, because he had everything that a centre forward should have. Charlie Henry went on and did a great job playing as a forward, because he wasn't a forward when I started. And Charlie was a great lad. I really got a lot of time. Smashing lad. Yeah. Best player I've played with, I would say, is probably Rob Lee, but a bit like Jimmy. Rob was at Charlton and in his comfort zone. I mean, the things that he was capable of doing, and he just needed to have a rocket, because to me, you had to work so-and-so's off to play every week. Just stood back in awe at some of the players that I was privileged to play with, and Rob Lee was one of those, and you just think, what are you doing? You're in severe danger of wasting your career. Well, not wasting it, but not fulfilling what you could be. And
Exactly. Yeah.
And he very nearly signed for Middlesbrough with Lenny Lawrence, because obviously Lenny knew him from Charlton.
Yeah.
Last minute intervention from Kevin Keegan. And Rob tells the story, and it's a brilliant story. He went up there and when it was absolutely freezing, he went, "We'll only be up there for half an hour, Dad." And then we took his dad to the river off. "I don't fancy coming up here." And half an hour later, he'd come out and said, "I'm signing." So Kevin Keegan obviously sold him a story, and yeah, he became Alan Shearer's best mate. They're still best of mates now, and he had a fantastic career. Played for England, did everything that I thought he should do. So sorry, that wasn't the quickest of answers, was it?
No, well, that's fine. And just one more we can fit in. You've spoken a lot about your managers, all the different ones you've had. Who would you rate the best for you personally to bring you through?
I think I've learned something from all of them, and that's not diplomatic, not being over diplomatic. You have to learn from people who have been through it and are now in a position of management. When you're a youngster, you don't always. The person I owe most to is probably Dave Smith, because he signed me as a schoolboy, and then he signed me again at Plymouth and gave me that moment. I had an awful lot of time for Ken. I think Ken was a little bit unlucky. I think he had great enthusiasm. I think he was a good man manager, and I think he was. I didn't realise that we finished as low as 17th, Power. I didn't realise that. So could he have any arguments? Then possibly no, because he built a team that should have gone up. Lou, I admire Lou because he came in with a principle and he abandoned it when he knew it didn't work. And you get so many coaches this year now that say, right, this is the way we're playing. It's the only way we're playing, and that the whole club. And the success he had at Swindon, he taught me about fitness and needing to get to the top level. You need to be as fit as you possibly can. So from that regard, I learned a lot. Again, Dave Smith obviously goes without saying. Barry Lloyd, an eye for a player. He had an unbelievable eye for a player, and he got some players in, and they all performed for him. Wasn't, in my opinion, the greatest coach. He wasn't the most hands-on manager, actually. But he just put a team together and wanted them to get on and play with it. So a very kind of relaxed style. And that was Barry. Then Alan and Steve are just two quality people, and Steve hard-working, knows his football inside out. Alan, very, very diligent. He wants to prepare your teams as best as you can, gives you as much information as possible. But again, he spends a lot of time on characters, understanding characters, wanting to have a right blend of characters, good professionals, people who aren't going to cause him a lot of grief in terms of being, too. Having said that, he sounds on Paolo Di Canio, so I might not know what I'm talking about. But so, we learn from everything. And, with Kevin, we learned so much in that year that we would have done very differently in the second year. And Kevin and Steve McCall, that upgraded from the youth team, went on and got them to the play. They should have gone up that season, blew it at the last game of the season at Orient, and then lost in the playoff final against Colchester. But did a great job, and then got offered the Plymouth job. And again, Kevin, was probably a dream job for Kevin, came too early, I think. But you can't making it.
Yeah, Kevin Hodges, lovely chap. Got to know him very well indeed, and I think he's back at Argyle in the youth team setup, or he has been recently, hasn't he? So he was up
until about 18 months ago when he was released, and I think Kevin, he was running the academy. I still speak to Kevin regularly. So
yeah, lovely chap. This is from Pete. Fantastic to hear about the person behind the footballer. Thank you so much for coming on. And I think that's sometimes we don't get that, Chris, do we? That we want to know behind the football. Right. Anthony White says best guest so far. So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
You'll be back.
Yeah. Thank you. There are loads of other questions, and I think the best thing, because we could go on all night, quite literally. There is an official Supporters Club Facebook page, Gary. So if you go on to that, the questions are all underneath this interview. I don't know if you've got the time to do that. Just have a look through and see that.
I'll take the time to do that, because I appreciate, as I said, I didn't have the best of times.
Oh, we're frozen.
Oh, he's frozen.
He's frozen. Okay, well, I'll do our end.
Oh, he's back. He's back. He's froze for just a minute.
I'll take the time to do that as and when I can. So to all those people who've asked the questions, take the time to do that, and to you guys for giving me the opportunity, because it's nice to talk. I do a lot of stuff that some of the other clubs don't quite do so much with Swindon, so it's actually nice for me to hear somebody like Derek coming in with the questions. Lovely, because Derek,
exactly.
Character, is he still on his motorbikes?
He's everywhere. A fantastic chap, and he wasn't very well, but thankfully he's better now, and we look forward very much to seeing him when we can go back to games.
Yeah. Well, let's all hope that's very, very soon.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Garry. It's been brilliant. So next week we have got our former midfielder from the late 80s, early 90s, Tom Jones. Local lad in a lot of cases, been around a lot of the non-league in local football after he was at Swindon. So we'll welcome him next week. Don't forget the James Munro restoration of his gravestone. If you can have a look at Just Giving Page, that'd be brilliant. Other than that, thank you, Garry. Thank you, Vic. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.